Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the Nonprofits this wonderful October 15th, Wednesday, 2025. I'm here with two wonderful dudes, and we are going to get into it. So, without further ado, I want to point out that atheists have a long history. In fact, I would argue that everyone is an atheist at some point in their lives until the people around them imprint their own value systems and worldviews onto them as unsuspecting and helpless children. Nonetheless, some people find their way back out of that indoctrination and need a place to which they can turn. Something that is incredibly difficult for new atheists is having the courage to speak out, especially when marginalization and rejection from friends, family, and society can be the result. Oh, but what a feeling when that breakout happens. When you're able to find the like minded and free critical thinkers who are probably more numerous than you may assume. So keep searching and keep checking us out here at the Nonprofits and the Atheist Community of Austin. The article we are reviewing tonight talks about the hardships of atheist community building, as well as the rewards. We dive into a lecture, an area of expertise on atheism and politics with Dr. Kristina Lee from the University of South Dakota. And this article comes from Ed Hat Santa Barbara by Robert Bernstein on September 22nd, 2025. So, gentlemen, I am here to talk about building atheist community, which is what I've been doing with you guys for like, I don't know, 2 years or so, right?
Yeah.
We've gotten to know each other. We have our own little tribe going on in our virtual world, but also I think that when I came out of religion and I came across other atheists having discussions about being atheists, I was like, wow, I didn't know that these conversations could even take place. It never happened for me in my little bubble. And I'll break down the specifics of the article, but I feel like I want to take an opportunity and just talk about what atheist community building really means for all of us, because it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard. It's easy to find each other on the internet and work with each other, but doing it in your own community, doing it locally, I don't know that I have any experience with that. It's a little nerve-wracking. So I don't know if I wanted to kind of get your guys' take on what it means to be an atheist community. Eli, I'll start with you. You know, how has it been for you?
Well, yeah, I sort of had the same reaction you did. Like when I first started finding like, oh, there's like this whole online world of like people talking about this. Cause for me, like it was like another podcast network first that I found. And then one of them was here at the ACA as a guest one time. So I found the ACA through that and realized like, I had no idea what to think about the world without religion, because everything that I had grown up learning, or all of my worldview came from religion. So when it came to like learning things like, what do I think about like relationships? What's important in those?
Yeah.
And like, what do I think is masculine? Like, what do I think is moral? Like all those sorts of things that we talk all the time that like atheism isn't a monolith. So even within atheism, we have all these different versions, like people who think different things about all those different categories, and it's not as simple as finding like, oh, you're an atheist, so we think all the same things. It's like you said, it's easy to find other people to like work with and talk with, a couple times a week on occasion, but finding that like local, like local community is so important. Like it not to undersell or understate the importance or the benefit of online community, but
Yeah.
it can compare to like local in-person, affirmation,
Yeah.
I think.
Jonathan, you were alive when Jesus was crucified. What was it like for atheists? What was it? What was the atheist? I couldn't help myself. I had to throw a spear there. I'm just kidding. But in your experience, and I know that you've got a long and storied career in service and as a member of the LGBTQ community, you have a lot of different places that you can turn to find your own tribe. But do they all acquiesce when you throw in the secularism aspect. What was atheist building like for you, or community building like for you?
Well, doesn't work out real well locally. I've actually started doing that now. Got about 9 people in a group here in Sun City, but the group I had was when I was affiliated with the Unitarian Universalist Church. They always had an atheist group, subgroup that met separately, whenever they wanted to, usually after church or something. They would gather and they do their community building there. But I was never a member of that. I'm fairly recent as far as it goes to pure atheism. Not I was always kind of I'll believe it as long as it's it was kind of amorphous. Anyway, when I actually, about 6 years ago, when I actually just called myself an atheist finally, and just, it was kind of like, yeah, that's what you are. Stop messing around, But the community I found was very rapidly was on Discord and the ACD. And I found people there. The problem I find with building community, even online, is that we are not monolithic. And there are some people who have very strong opinions, and they like to cancel people who don't have the same opinions. We're not immune to that. I mean, we claim to be rational and all that, but we're not immune to feeling like this person isn't really in our group, or isn't part of our tribe, because they have their own bunch of things in other areas. Because, atheism is just the answer to one question, do you or do you not believe in a God? That's it. Now you have people who still believe in the supernatural, people who still believe in spirits, but don't believe in a God. I have a very good friend who's like that, who's actually, but he calls himself an atheist and still believes in channeling spirits.
Yeah, so and I think just like the rest of the public, we've kind of also, even when we break it down to atheism not being monolithic, I think many atheists are quick to jump to not include people in their group that still believe in other supernatural aspects, right? Even though we know that atheism, and so we're all guilty of that in a way. I think I'm certainly guilty of maybe othering people, and it's good to hear you, Jonathan, say things about that, because it reminds me that I need to give people a chance, maybe, and I need to accept people's differences sometimes, because it might be easy to be like, man, I don't like that guy or gal, or I'm not sure what they're doing here. But honestly,
and a lot of times the arguments, I'm sorry to interrupt, but sometimes the argument is not worth losing a friend over.
Sure. Eli, did you have something you wanted to add before we move on? Because I do want to get into this topic here that Dr. Lee talks about.
There was certainly a thought that I had while John was talking, but in the interest of not interrupting, I ended up losing it. So.
Okay. Well, hey, we'll get it back. We'll get it back, because I want to continue with this idea that we all, I think, we can say that we have the non-God belief or the disbelief in God in common, right? But I think what Dr. Lee introduces in this article is the idea of Christonormativity. And many atheists, I think, are really finding their way to atheism because they reject that Christonormativity. At least for me, when I found out that you could reject it, it propelled me to want to question more beliefs. Because I just don't think that ordering a society based on a dogma is fair. And there are many arguments where it's not even really fair for the actual adherence to that religion, although I'm not going to get into it at this point. I just think that, if you break down the different sects and the way that they can clash with each other, it's better, like we talked about on Monday, when you have a secular arrangement in your government, you have kind of this ability to make sure that people have equality a little bit easier, I think. But when it comes to being an atheist, we reject this idea of theist normativity, Christonormativity. And Dr. Lee, in her lecture that this article outlines, is teaching that atheists actually do have a long history and we should learn and teach it. So, Jonathan, I want to jump to you. What do you think society is society getting better at that? Is atheist community getting better at teaching our own history and learning from it? Is there a way that maybe that education is being captured or represented in commercial or government sectors? How do you feel like that history is displaying itself?
I don't feel it is really.
Okay.
We're doing a lousy job of putting our situation and our ideas out in the public. And I'm to blame for that too, because a lot of times I don't speak up when I probably had the opportunity to speak to somebody about it. And that kind of education is, I think, very important. People do get into the discussion of it with their family when they first turn into an atheist and turn into, it's like, skin changers, skinwalkers, but when they finally decide that this is what I am, and they learn about it and they get all their background and they go to their families who are extremely religious, they have those discussions and usually end up just with a door slammed in their face. So they get gun shy about talking to anybody about it. And so that's but we need to do that. We need to get our ideas out there, and we need to say that a secular world is a better world. It doesn't have the restrictions. It doesn't have the stifling of new ideas and information and creativity that dogma does to you. Mm-hmm. And so in order for us to become a much more technologically advanced and ethically advanced civilization, we're going to need to start shifting towards that. Fortunately, the surveys say that not atheism, which really hasn't moved the needle very much, but what they call the nuns, people who don't like being associated with a formal religion, is extremely growing very, very fast. Well, that's
let me put a pin in that one. Let me put a pin in. I'm sorry, but you gave a great segue talking about where we've come from to where we go, because I want to talk to Eli about his perspective on the tools that we have available to us today, which we didn't have in the past. And that speaks a little bit to our history. Eli, tell us about those tools. How is that working with or against atheism?
Yeah, so I just think our ability to do this was unprecedented when the earliest secular organizations came about, which I agree with John. I think there has been a terrible job done of, atheist history being taught, because I didn't know until reading this article that there was an infidel convention in the New York Coliseum in 1845 or 54. One of those two. I got to look at it again. In 1845, that and they, of course, they didn't want to be identified who was there, but there was 500 people in attendance at this secular non-believer convention, and I think. There was the article that we read showed a little newspaper clipping of that of somebody talking about that convention having happened, and my thought to myself was it's kind of interesting to think how even with us having these abilities to talk about atheism and just let other people know that hey, there are people who don't believe this, and if you are also don't believe this, you're not alone. Even though we have these tools and this, even though we have this international community now, there are still people that are just as afraid of being atheists, like you guys were just saying, that as the infidels were in 1845, and it's just because of how it because of that Christonormativity, that Theo-normativity, which I like better than theist normativity.
That's good.
But because of this expectation that it's just the normal thing to believe in a God, and if you don't, you're weird, as if that's not how you're born. it's, you know, it's striking to me that even with what we might subjectively call progress, or maybe even objectively, we still have that fear among so many people in so much of the world.
Yeah, I think the fear is the thing that holds people back. Like there are other associated fears. And you guys were both in the military, just like myself. We're familiar with a term called second and third order effects, right? If you know what is the result of the result, and so I have to think about how are my children going to be treated in the community. I don't walk around with a shirt that says atheist on it because I don't want to bump into some parents or some teacher that may treat them differently, you know, and have them be the weirdo in school. I'm sorry, you know, I don't mean to
Yep,
kind
no,
of,
but
you know what I mean. Like I don't want to
relate.
invoke that kind of thinking against people, but kids are brutal and people suck, you know?
Yeah.
So, Jonathan, you started going down a road, and this is kind of in conjunction with the 1845 convention from the infidels, but the nuns, right? People who don't want to be associated. Which, by the way, with the last point I was making, it's almost easier and less. You make yourself less of a target by just saying I don't believe in anything than saying I'm an atheist, because of the connotations that Christonormativity or Theo-normativity have attached to atheism. But Jonathan, you were talking about these groups moving along the needle in favor of people who are in opposition or who contrast Christo or theist normativity. Tell me about some of the you had some comments about organizations that are task minded. How does that all work together?
Well, well, if I remember correctly, which is probably a problem, but there are groups, not only historically but currently. You have several groups, and they're kind of desperate and disparate, not desperate, groups that like the Humanist Society. There's the Satanic Temple. There's, a lot of them have different mission statements, but there's the American Atheist Association. There's a lot of these groups now that work in trying to get out the good news of atheism. Sorry about that. I couldn't resist. But they're busy working at this stuff. There are some international organizations that have really started helping people deconstruct, like Recovery from Religion and some other groups. But there is a Free Thinkers Caucus in Congress. So these things. That has been growing, by the way, which is nice, but but not really to a size that it's going to be much of an influence at this point. But so there's a lot of disparate. I'm going to have to keep pronouncing that right. Groups that really they go to conventions together, and there is some interaction. But I think the mission statements are so slightly different from one each other that they don't have a united presentation.
Okay.
And so since there's no united plan, like to teach and popularize or get people to know what atheists are about, and since we do have such a non-monolithic situation, it's very difficult to hold people together. The only thing that will hold them together is community itself. Having a community, having someplace there are some of those too, and I won't name all of them because not all of them are nonprofit, but there are quite a few of them that provide basic community for people.
In the article, Dr. Lee actually says that engaging in charity work is not only a good way to help build the atheist community, but also a way to overcome this atheist perception that we are uncaring. And that I kind of have a disagreement with her on something, because to say that, but then say, and she noted that there is also a lot of good in Christianity. I disagree. I disagree. She said there is a lot that is not good, but there is a lot of good. I would be hesitant to spread that message as an atheist.
Yeah.
And I guess in some kind of way I'm an anti-theist, but I really have to look at the history of Christianity and the way that Christianity impacts people. And so, to the points that Dr. Lee made, for example, straight white men are often more likely to adopt the atheist label, right? Atheists of color, women, and rural atheists are more likely to feel isolated. Well, yeah. This is an
Of
example of
course.
white privilege working in advantage, working in the benefit, the interests, I should say, of white men, where
Mhm.
we are not all the more likely to be ostracized. We are not likely, or as likely as women or people of color, to feel that marginalization. And when you add the atheist label on top of it, well, they've pushed themselves further into isolation. And so I think Christianity has a hand in doing that. Christianity fueled the slave trade. Christianity, not only endorsed the horrible, horrible treatment of slaves in a way, because of course, it was used to justify it, but the way that Christonormativity has been applied to women in Western culture and in the United States for most of its history
There you
is
go.
not good at all. And to the homosexual community, the LGBTQ community, not been kind at all. So to say that there is a lot of good in Christianity, I would ask people to point to the title of this segment that says, "Is religion even necessary?" Because if us atheists are out there building community and doing charity work, well, we can do all of those things without the dogmas that oppress so many people. And I think that is an important message for people to understand, and part of the education that we as atheists need to learn, like Dr. Lee says, and put forward. And on that, I think I have kind of given all the points I wanted to make. Gentlemen, I'm gonna turn the floor back over to you. We'll go with Jonathan first, and then we'll finish out with Eli. So, Jonathan, what should our viewers be taking away?
I would just say that what you can do is, and I found this here, is you can get online in your local area and see what's available in your own town and who's available in your own town. Ask them to coffee. Set up a meeting in the local restaurant for a cup of coffee, and a snack, and just to talk. And that's how the ACA got started. Talk to people that you think might be amenable to that position, our position, and then from then on, just keep building that. One person will lead to another person. I've started off with 0 for a few weeks, and now I have 9 people
Nice.
in this area.
Nice.
And that might be where I top out in this particular community, but 9 people to meet for coffee is plenty, to start a group of people just being able to talk to one another
Hey,
about their beliefs or non-beliefs.
that's a small movement, man. Congratulations, and keep up the good work. Eli, what do you have to say to our viewers as we part ways on this Wednesday night?
I think John had solid advice, and I hope that if over time more and more atheist community starts to expand and then integrate with each other, eventually it would be just as strange to have like a community for people that aren't racist, right? Like nobody, at least if you're watching this in the archives, at least right now, nobody is like, what do you mean you're not racist? So I think once we get to that point where not believing in God is just as natural as not being racist, then or is viewed as just as natural as not being racist, then hopefully, we'll be all be feeling a little more connected.
Yeah, that is a good comparison. Of course, people used to take this view like, oh yeah, they're less than us. What are you crazy? And now I think now it's comforting to know that at least that's more, it's more likely to not run into that. But there's still work to be done on multiple fronts. And, you know, in my experience, the atheist community is one that is centered on rights for everybody, human rights, right? So that is something that I think is incredibly important, and there should be room for everybody there. And with that, folks, thank you again for tuning in for segment 2 this week. Tune in again on Friday at, I always get this one wrong, Eli. You're gonna
6
have to help me.
p.m.
6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. Take care, folks.